Hello. So I'm Dr. Burks. A lot of my students are here, so I might focus naturally on this side of the room. But we're going to be talking about ice, fire, and chemistry. So how many people read the books or have read the books? Awesome. How many people watch the show? Okay. Both? Okay. Hardcore fans? Okay. So some of the stuff will sound familiar. A few things if you watch the show, they just haven't gotten to yet. Okay. If you're reading the books and you're in process like I am, some of the stuff is going to be in later books. Okay. Some of the stuff you would have seen before. Okay. So what are we talking about when we talk about the Song of Ice and Fire and Chemistry? Well, if you're the show fan, you know it as Game of Thrones. Right? If you're a book fan, this is what the book series is called. Okay? So this is the book series as it stands today. Okay? There are 5 books. Game of Thrones is the first book, which is the one the show kind of kicked off with. Clash of Kings, Storm of Swords, Feast of Crows, Dance of Dragons. And the last 2 books have already been named. Rumor has it that book 6 will come out early 2016. Of course, they've been saying that for a long time. Martin is notorious for taking a long time to work on each book. But now that there's a show, what book is the show approximately on? Because the show starts again next month. Feast of Crows. So we are knocking on the door of when we need to have a new book. So hopefully we'll have one soon. That might actually be prompting Martin to build this new book, or release it at least. He's been working on it. Anybody who has watched the show or read the books, would you say that it is straightforward? Complicated? Are there lots of characters? Intrigue? Duplicity? Murderous plots? Changing alliances? Have you ever watched it or read it and thought, I need to be making a flow chart so I can remember who I'm watching, who's aligned with who, who's living where, what's going on? It's a very involved story. Okay? One of the reasons why it's such an involved story is because Martin has created an entire fantasy world. What is one of the worlds called? Where do they live? What's the name of it? Westeros is one name. Okay. Is there another continent? Essos. Okay. So they have continents. Do they have kingdoms, queendoms? So there's political machinations going on. He has built an entire fantasy world that is incredibly complicated. Right? And if you have a fantasy world, just like when you have the real world, we can look at science to examine that world. So for us, here in the real world, we have a whole type of science called natural science. And in natural science, you take some type of science, can be physics, can be biology, can be chemistry, okay, can be mathematics, and now, of course, in our newest era, computer science. And we're going to study the natural and physical world, or some phenomenon in it. Okay? So basically, you're going to look around you, okay, or look at things from the inside out, including other people, and you're going to try to figure out what makes them tick. Okay? That's what we do in natural science. Well, that's also what you do in unnatural science. So what if, instead of looking at the real world, you use science to look at an imaginary and fantasy world to examine fiction, to explain what is going on in the fictional world. Okay? Martin has constructed an entire world with its own continents, its own weather patterns, okay? Its own people, its own types of people, its own phenomenon, its own medicines, its own weapons, all of that. So if you have all of that, then you can use science to examine it just as you would in the real world. Okay? And people have already done that. So if you've ever watched the show, what's one of the most famous lines from the show? Winter is coming. Well, why hasn't that phrase ever caught on in the real world? Like, why didn't somebody back in, 801 go, golly, I think winter is coming. Because everybody else would have been like, duh, winter comes every year. It's called weather. It turns out that in this world that Martin has created, is winter a regular occurrence like it is here? No. That Westeros has some kind of wacky weather thing going on. So you had a bunch of astronomers and weather folks and physicists try to decide, is there some reason why this fictional world, a real life reason why their weather pattern is not regular like our own? And there's actually a scientific explanation for that. That could literally happen. Has to do with wobble tilt on the axis of the planet. That could really happen. Okay. Also, doctors are pretty sure everybody in Game of Thrones should be dead. Why? Besides the fact they keep killing each other at a crazy rate. What's one of the number one reasons why you die when you go into the hospital here? Infection. Okay. They don't really seem to have that all thing sorted out in the Game of Thrones world. So there really should be even more bodies based on the limitations to science that it's occurring in these books. Okay. Also, you have geologists that have gone and explained the entire topology of the maps. How does it exist? How are certain natural phenomenons existing? What's up with the wall and the people beyond the wall? All of that scientists are trying to explain. And of course, one of the favorite things for me about Game of Thrones, because I'm a chemist, is they kill people with poisons. So another big thing is, when people do get killed with these fictional poisons, can we explain what's going on there? So there was a bunch of chemists. Oh, spoiler, by the way, King Joffrey totally died. If you haven't watched the last season. So, sorry. But hey, that was last year. You guys should have caught up to that by now. So he dies, and he dies in a particularly gruesome fashion. Does anybody know how he dies in Martin's book? What's the name of the poison? The Strangler. Okay. So you had a bunch of chemists come out of the woodwork trying to explain what that poison could be in real life. And I was actually one of those people. Fans of George R.R. Martin's Fire and Ice series and the HBO show Game of Thrones know two things. One, don't get too attached to any of the characters. Two, weddings aren't always happy occasions.
Okay, folks, obligatory spoiler alert if you have not caught up to the latest episode of Game of Thrones. So at his wedding, King Joffrey dies from a particularly nasty poison, the Strangler. There's no need to argue about whether or not the little punk deserved it, but instead, let's talk about exactly what this poison is. Chemist Rachelle Burks at Doane College in Nebraska has done a little research and might have some leads as to what this rare and deadly poison could be made out of.
Now, 3 plants have been featured quite a lot in both fictional and non-fictional murder plots. That would be belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, poison hemlock, and to round out our trio of usual suspects, Strychnos nox vomica, also known as the strychnine tree. Now, all 3 of these plants share something in common. They all make alkaloids.
In general terms, alkaloids are naturally occurring compounds that share the same basic chemical structure. They've all got at least one nitrogen atom in a heterocyclic ring. Here are 3 deadly alkaloid suspects. In Martin's mythology, the Strangler causes the muscles in a person's neck to clench together tighter than a fist. So tight that air can't pass through the windpipe, causing the victim to asphyxiate. So, do any of these 3 alkaloids share a common characteristic with the Strangler?
Well, let's take a look at the first 2 members of our poisonous trio, belladonna and hemlock. Now, these 2 do affect our muscles. They cause your muscles to relax.
So that leaves us with just strychnine.
10 to 20 minutes after you've injected a lethal dose of strychnine, you're going to start feeling your muscles convulse. Now, which muscles? Here's the really interesting part. The strychnine also affects the muscles in the face and the neck first. That kind of fits in with how Martin has described the strangler as causing the muscles in a man's neck to clench up.
This makes a pretty good match, but there are some details that need to be covered before we can be sure. Martin writes that the strangler is made from the leaves of a plant on an island in the Sea of Jade, half a world away, and that poison is extracted from these leaves using a wash of lime and then treated with a wash of sugar. It's true that strychnine can be found in the leaves of a plant, but what about this wash of lime? Is this a practical way of getting the poisonous alkaloids out?
What if Martin doesn't mean limes as in the fruit? He means limes as in a limestone product, calcium oxide. This type of lime is very alkaline. It's very basic. It has a high pH. And this type of lime has been used as part of a multi-step extraction technique to get alkaloids out of plants.
And again, what about this sugar? Is it really necessary?
Strychnine, like a lot of alkaloids, has a very bitter taste. It doesn't taste good. So we might need sugar and spices to disguise the taste of strychnine. Because if you're trying to poison someone, you don't want them to know that usually.
So just like everyone's favorite alkaloid, caffeine, strychnine is definitely in need of a little sweetness. And it looks like we've got a pretty good match for Martin's deadly strangler. It may very well be that strychnine is the poison that took down King Joffrey.
So I propose that the strangler is actually strychnine, right? It's a really gruesome death. There are, the muscles in your body will convulse so violently it can actually rip muscle from the bone. It can kill you in anywhere between 15, 20 minutes depending on dose. It could take up to 3 hours and you would be in agony the entire time. Now, anybody who knows King Joffrey would think totally still deserves it. But it's not an efficient method. You really have to give someone a super high acute dose to make it work. But the way Martin described how the poison works and the extraction technique and all of the stuff that was added into it, we can find that process. What are some famous alkaloids that you can think of? So strychnine is one, caffeine, okay, and a famous illicit one that you also get from a plant that you extract in a jungle using acid and base. Cocaine. Right? All of these have a similar structure, and all of them can be extracted in the way that's described. Okay? You can do a base extraction, or as anyone in organic can know, you can do an acid extraction, right? Get it to be soluble, right? Then you can reprotonate it, get it into a different solvent. You guys have done that, right? So if you can do one alkaloid that way from a plant, guess what? You can do them all that way. Okay? So that kind of real life application of chemistry, you can see it. Martin doesn't spell that out, but you can definitely see in his writing of the Strangler, it sounds to me as if he's doing with limes. If he's using the fruit, limes are bases or acids? Acids. So it sounds like he's doing an acid extraction. And then in the book, he treats it with soda ash. Okay? That's going to be basic. The alkaloid's still going to be bitter. So if you read the book, it's described as treated with sugar and spices. That's good because you're going to need to disguise that taste. All alkaloids have a lot of things in common. They have different actions, but the one big thing they have in common is they tend to be white crystalline solids. They tend to be bitter. Coffee, that tastes bitter to you? There's a couple different bitter alkaloids in there. Okay? But is there a way you can hide the taste of coffee if that really isn't your thing? Yeah, it's called Starbucks. You order your mocha frappa or whatever. Okay? So there is a way around that. Okay? So you can find these real life equivalents. So I bet you that Martin is a kind of person. I don't know him obviously personally, wish I did. But he strikes me as a person who's doing a lot of research. Okay? A lot. So he's building this fictional world, but it's not really from nothing. He is using a lot of real-world stuff. The motivations throughout history for science in general and chemistry specifically, and I would even say in Game of Thrones, what do you think the biggest motivations are? Meaning, what's an inspiration for science? You want to do something. What do you think that you would want to do that would motivate people to spend time and money?
Power.
Power?
Either extend life or end it.
Extend life or end it. Okay. Power might be in that, right? You might want to have a weapon. Okay. You might need to know that you're going to have to keep the soldiers alive and kill other ones. Okay, so that fits into the power dynamic too. You want to maybe kill people, you want to heal people. What's another big human motivation? Okay. Money comes back to power. To get the power, you might actually have to kill someone or keep other people alive. What's another big human motivation? So we've said kill. We've said heal. I'd say sex. That's not something we invented, by the way. Okay? We've been doing that for a long time. Okay? And that can really get us back into healing, and we'll see how we'll connect all of these things. But these are motivations in the history of science. These three things have motivated more things than anything else. You want to kill something or kill someone. You want to heal someone, or you want to have consequence-free sex. Okay? Those three motivations pretty much explain a great deal of science throughout history. And that, I'm not talking about us. We are late to the party. We've had some cool technology, but the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, China, going back ancient civilizations, okay, Aztecs, Mayans, they came up with cool stuff because they wanted to do one of these three things or probably a combination therein. Okay. Martin's world is no different. And if you've ever watched the HBO show, these are the motivations ruling that show. And behind those might be a quest for power, but what are you going to have to do to get it and maintain it? Probably one of these three, okay? Or a combination therein. So how do we use chemistry to do all of this stuff? Well, let's take a look at one of the most dramatic moments in the book and in the show. Everybody was like, wow, that was dazzling special effects. Okay? So one of the biggest weapons and the scariest things mentioned is wildfire, also known as the substance. Okay? Now, Martin himself has said that wildfire, which is scary, it sounds scary when you read it, right? You can't use water to put it out. It's incredibly unstable. Has to be stored in a special room with a time-release door so sand can quench it if it starts to ignite. Like, all of this stuff sounds super scary. But it's an amazing weapon if you're the one that has it and you're using it on someone else. Okay? Now, Martin has said, yep, it's modeled on Greek fire. And Greek fire was actually used by the Byzantine Greeks, okay? 7th century AD. That is a long time ago. We did not come up with chemical weapons. People have been using chemical weapons for a very long time. What's in Greek fire? Turns out nobody knows. Because the people in control of it did a really good job of making sure that nobody knew the recipe. Why? Because they wanted to maintain power, and they knew that they had the weapon to do it. Okay? So how would we build that today? Could we actually build something that looked like wildfire? Massive explosion, burning, high temperature, can't put it out with water. Okay? It's green in the solution, just being stored, and look at that green fireball when it's burning. Now, if you're really far away, say you're the one that has it and you've just taken out someone's entire navy and you're watching from the comfort of the docks, that would look like a really cool fireworks display. Okay. Now, how could we reproduce that in real life? Is there any one thing? No. And nowhere in the books does Martin say wildfire is one thing. It's a substance, but like a lot of stuff, it's probably a combination of things. Could we make, given what we have at our disposal now, could we make something similar? Yes, we can, because we have. Okay? So World War I is actually known as the Chemist's War. Okay? That's when we really started mass producing chemical weapons. We would find it in World War II, in Korea. Vietnam saw a whole new class of chemical weapons. We are very good at it. Okay? We can do it. Can we make it green? Yep. We can make it green because we use it to make pyrotechnics. If you burn barium nitrate at about 1,000 degrees, it's going to have what's called an electronic transition. And the light coming out is going to be green. It's beautiful. This is how you get green. This is typically how you get green fireworks. Bad news is, it's not green in solution. It's only green when you expose heat to it, and it goes through this electronic transition. It's a white crystalline solid. If you make a solution out of it, it's clear. So one thing that won't work. It's also not going to give you that burning blaze of like a gasoline fire. It just won't. So we're going to have to add something else. Well, the good news is we have all the other stuff too. Okay? So we have barium nitrate to give us that green kaboom at high temperature. Okay? We also have chromium oxide. It's a very well-known green pigment used in paints. Okay? The good thing is both of these are oil soluble too, which is good because guess what our next ingredient is going to need to be? Some type of oil, because if you can't put it out with water, this fire, what should that tell you right away? It's probably an oil-based fire. Okay. It's got to have an oxidizer in it too. Okay. We've made that. Napalm. Now, napalm isn't itself one thing either. When it was first made, it's basically considered thickened gasoline. It's got metal soaps in it. It really changes the viscosity. Have you guys ever seen a sterno, like for catering, and you light it and it looks like a pink gel? Well, the pink part is that's just dye. But that kind of thick gel, that's what you can get if you pick just the right napalm ingredients. You can change the viscosity too. You can make it a real thick gel, okay, kind of the consistency of maybe a hair gel even, depending on what kind of thickening agents you add to it, different types of oxidizers you could add in. Napalm is incredibly effective. You can launch it off ships. It's fairly stable when stored. Okay. So that part, the Martin's one is a little bit not so much with the stability. But the good news is our pigments and our other parts could be soluble in napalm. And lots of chemists have suggested that it's probably napalm would be the version. And Greek fire was probably petroleum-based. It would have been called naphtha. And back then, naphtha was like the all-inclusive term for a certain size of hydrocarbons. We just called it that. And what do you know about petroleum-based products? Are they flammable? Okay. And we made napalm for a very specific reason. What did we make it for? Terror. It's a chemical weapon. We wanted it to burn. We wanted to be able to dispense it in a flamethrower type dispensing mechanism, but we wanted it to be safer for the person who was using it. It is incredibly effective and terrifying. That sounds like wildfire to me. So we can do that, and we have done it. We just usually don't do it with the fanfare of, let me put some fireworks in there. But if you were to go home tonight and Google napalm and hit images, you would be awestruck by the level of terror that you would see. Okay? It could do the job. Now, some people have suggested, alternatively, that you use some kind of an anfro. So anfro is ammonium nitrate fuel oil. Made perhaps in the common vernacular, it was used to actually cause the Oklahoma City bombing. Easy to get, easy to make, fairly stable. When the Oklahoma City bombing happened, only about 50% of the load went off. That's a lot of power. That still brought down nearly half of a building. So that could be it too, because the fuel oil part is the hard to put out part. Okay? But it doesn't quite work with the rest of how Martin has described wildfire. I think napalm is probably, quote, the better choice. In the realm of terrifying, it's the better choice. Okay? And I've already talked about the strangler, but this is a tree. It's got, this poison. It's very famous. Agatha Christie probably made it the most famous because she used to use it like hotcakes to get rid of people in her books. Okay? So this is another great poison, the strangler. Great, I know it sounds creepy. Great meaning that it's famous in fiction. It is horrible if you use it on someone. It is an awful way to die. Okay? Now, weirdly, speaking of awful ways to die, Game of Thrones also mentions, hey, if you want to kill someone, you don't have to be like too mean with them. You can just pick like a super nice poison. If you have to kill someone you like, I don't know. But it's kind of a weird thing because they have this thing called sweet sleep. Okay? And this one, a few grains, okay, it can make you feel real chill. So that doesn't sound too bad. Okay? A pinch more and you'll fall into a deep and dreamless sleep. That, again, that's okay. 3 pinches and you are sleeping to no end. What does that sound like? Coma? Like, that doesn't sound like that's a good option, sleep to no end. And then, they don't really say anything at sleep. That's like a walk, almost a waking death. Okay? So you're in a medically induced coma forever? Sleep does not end. So it's not, you could use it to heal, but it also sounds like you could have someone have what's called locked-in syndrome. It's kind of unclear exactly what Martin means when he says this, but notice the first part of the phrase, the gentlest of poisons. When you want to take someone out, but you want to be nice about it. Okay? So it's kind of one of these weird things. But the key thing with this one is it tastes sweet, it smells sweet. Okay? In fact, so sweet that you have to hide it in cakes, pies, and honeyed wines. Most poisons aren't like that. Most poisons aren't sweet, but we do have one really famous sweet poison that every once in a while you hear someone tries to kill somebody else with it. What is it? Every one of you owns it, by the way. Antifreeze. Ethylene glycol. If you own a car, you got here in a car, or you have a car at home, maybe you don't personally own one right now, but you've probably handled this, that bright green stuff. By the way, it's not green. We add that in just so that you know, don't drink it. Okay? It's incredibly sweet. Its friend, propylene glycol, guess what it's in? A whole lot of stuff. Because propylene glycol won't kill you. It's an approved sweetener for food. Really sweet, liquid. Rivals high fructose corn syrup. However, ethylene glycol, also sweet, guess what? Totally kill you. Okay? You can't metabolize it properly. You'll get these crystals that will start taking up residence in your organs, usually your kidneys. It is not pleasant. Okay? But it's very sweet. You couldn't try to hide it in your water. People who've poisoned people with it hide it in Gatorade. Okay? They hide it in soda. full calorie soda. It's that sweet that even if you tried to put it in diet, someone would be like, whoa, this isn't diet. It's that sweet. So that kind of fits the bill, but the sleep part is a problem. It doesn't cause that. Okay? So what if we combined it with chloroform? Chloroform actually smells sweet. And what's the history of chloroform? It was used as what? An anesthetic. It's the reason why when we did that lab, you had to do it in the hood. Okay? Breathe too much of it, you're like, oh, this smells nice. Okay? So that, what if we combine them together? And then, of course, let's add in a barbiturate. Okay? Now, this was one of the first barbiturates ever synthesized, and it does a bang-up job of knocking you out. You're going to feel chill and relax and just go nice into a sleep. But what do we also know about barbiturates? They're addictive. Sometimes people OD on them. Okay? Now, if we combined all these things together, we can almost come up with what Martin described. Because these two would make you feel good and knock you out, and then maybe when you're knocked out, someone's giving you a cute dose of that, and you're going to die. And you just won't know it because you'll be in la-la land because you're high on barbiturates and chloroform. Do we have precedence in the real world for using these types of drug cocktails to affect people? Absolutely. If you go under for surgery, is that one drug? Nope, it's a drug cocktail. Okay? Even when we're trying to keep you alive but keep you out of pain, that takes a lot of management of drugs. Okay? If we put you to death, that's a trio of drugs usually. Okay? So it's very rare actually when we're trying to treat or trying not to treat that we can accomplish that with one thing. We usually have to do kind of a combination, especially when we're trying to keep people alive but unconscious. Because what's one thing that will wake you up if you're in pain? And they've used that to try to snap people out of certain states. They'll cut off oxygen or induce physical pain to try to see if they can kickstart you back into consciousness. So that's why I think we can get away with the combination of sleep, pain, and then while you're out of it, we've poisoned you, by the way. So we do kind of a drug cocktail, which I think is just one option. The good thing that I love about Game of Thrones and all of these types of fantasy worlds is this is just one option. Another chemist, another student, another person is going to have their own combination of what they think will work. We'll talk about it, they'll write about it, and there's a lot of ways you can accomplish this, and that's the fun part, is being able to have enough information to really get into, well, here's my suggestion, and being able to actually come up with something. Tears of Lie. Has that shown up in the show yet? Do you think it's coming this season? Because it's a big one. Okay? This is called the crueler poison. So you've already did the poison that was nice. Okay? Tasteless, odorless, affects the bowels and the belly and kills in that area. So as soon as I read this, what do you think I thought it was? If you're into poisons like I am, that's not as creepy as it sounds. I am a chemist, okay? What do you think right off the bat? And if you've read Agatha Christie, you've probably got an idea too. Arsenic. That's old school, man. Arsenic is called the king of poisons. It's also called inheritance powder. People used to use it all the time to kill people. It's also not as unpleasant as strychnine, but also, right, I'd say, okay? It's colorless, tasteless, odorless. You can hide it in wine. You could sprinkle it in someone's coffee. Maybe when you're in the dining hall, they look away. Okay? Don't do that, any of you. Okay? What does it cause? Diarrhea, vomiting, stomach pain, bloody urine, cramping muscles, hair loss, stomach, it's horrible. How do people get away with poisoning everyone? Because it looks just like gastritis. Inflammation of the bowels and the stomach, the bloody urine, causes multi-system failure. I would put this in the cruel zone. Okay? And back in the day, it was easy to get. You could go down to the chemist, the pharmacy. I'm going to need some arsenic. Okay. You could buy it, home delivery. You could go to like Home Depot equivalent and be like, I'm going to need some arsenic. Okay? It was that common. And then we decided, you know what, maybe we should make it harder to get. Okay? So I think this is a good one. Okay? Essence of nightshade, anti-anxiety sleep aid. Do we have those? Oh yeah. This is probably the easiest. I think there's a couple easy ones that you read and you're like, I think I know what you're going for here. Now, this is supposedly a liquid that you take, you know what, you just need to chill. And there are a lot of characters in Game of Thrones that need to chill. Okay? So everyone's high as a kite on this stuff, it seems like. Okay? Now, we have something that I think could fit the bill. This is actually called Doane elixir. The Doane is the trade name. It's actually, again, it's a drug cocktail. It's a combination of phenobarbital, another barbiturate. So what's that going to do? Pain relief, maybe a little sleepy sleep. Okay. And then we've got a bunch of atropine, hycosamine, scopolamine. Okay. What's that going to do? Muscle relaxers. That sounds kind of nice. Okay. What is atropine from? Well, in fact, atropine, cosamine, scopolamine, those are all from one thing. Phenobarbital we have to make. It's a barbiturate. But the other three are from a plant called deadly nightshade, also known as belladonna. Okay. In small enough doses, it can be medicinally useful because it's a muscle relaxant. Okay. Atropine is also used to help regulate your heart. However, what if you take too much? It will kill you. It'll induce cardiac arrhythmia. Also, it's a muscle relaxant. It was one of the options that's mentioned in the video. Okay. Is your breathing controlled by muscles? Is your heart a muscle? Esophageal tract, is that controlled by muscles? There's smooth muscle and striated muscle. But if you take out one or the other, eventually you'll die, especially if it can affect cardiac muscle. So if you take too much, good night. Okay. If you take just the right amount, a medicinal dose, along with the barbiturate, you're going to be feeling pretty chill. You're not going to have any worries, and you're going to feel a bit sleepy. So this could work. Doane is actually used to treat IBS. What's that? Irritable bowel syndrome. It's a muscle relaxer. Is your stomach controlled by muscles? Yep. Does IBS cause anxiety? Absolutely. Are you also in pain usually with IBS? Yep. So this combination in pill form and in liquids is used now. IBS is the main medical use, but there are people who get it prescribed to simply help them sleep and to deal with anxiety. That sounds like George R.R. Martin's, what he's trying to go for there. Milk of poppy. This is probably the easiest one. What is this one, you guys? Opium. When you cut into the poppy, it's milky white, and you're going to get out codeine and morphine. Those are darn good painkillers. Okay? Anyone who's ever, been on codeine or morphine knows. Okay? It'll do the trick. Okay? And it's got a long history of natural use as a painkiller and as an anesthetic. Anesthetic part is you've actually taken too much. Okay, so that's kind of not its on-script purpose. Now, anesthetics, that's why the doctor said everybody should be dead. But Game of Thrones actually lists a lot of anesthetics. 2 of them are fire milk and Irish fire. So what do you think happens when you put it on yourself based on the names? It burns. But don't we have anesthetics now that when you put them on yourself, they kind of burn? Yeah. What if you use isopropanol? First aid alcohol, rubbing alcohol, you find the first, is that going to burn? Heck yeah. So that's historically accurate. And do we have anesthetics we use now? We have more than enough. We have ones in different classes. These are just the ones that are in common hospital use. We've got tons. He's just using the ones that burn. We got plenty of those. What's the other one that burns? Hydrogen peroxide, a little stingy, a little bit, with bubbles. Alcohol burns. Which is the one that's red? Mercurochrome? What about old school iodine? Because the other thing that these 2 anesthetics in the book, they're kind of red and they burn. One of them's more liquidy, one of them's more of a gel. We can do that because you can buy good anesthetic that's actually a combination, right? Okay? So that's what Martin, if you look at Martin, he clearly has done the research and using real stuff in his fictional world. He's not totally reinventing the wheel. Okay? Now, what about moon tea? This is where we get to sex. Okay? We did not invent birth control. We like to think we did. We did not. Okay? We invented, I would say, by far, the most reliable forms of birth control. But scientists and civilizations have been coming up with ways to prevent pregnancy and STDs, okay, going back a very long way. There are ancient texts that have been dug up out of the desert, and they're like, ooh, what is this going to describe? Chapter after chapter after chapter of how to prevent pregnancies and how to end them. Ancient Greeks had several texts on it, Romans, Mesopotamia, all of Asia, all of South America currently. Every culture around the world has spent a lot of time trying to have consequence-free sex. Martin's world is no different. Okay? The cool thing about what Martin's done is he's described moon tea with a level of historical accuracy that cannot be duplicated. I mean, he's really done, this one, he's done the dead-on best job. So it's tansy, mint, and wormwood, a spoon of honey, and a drop of pennyroyal. Turns out that this is probably the one I'm most impressed with Martin, because he got it dead right. This here is what we call tansy plant. Okay. This is the chemical culprit, what makes it toxic. Okay. At low doses, it causes, quote, it promotes menstruation. Okay. So the vaginal lining is going to start to slough off. If you're menstruating, can you get pregnant? Or are you pregnant if you're menstruating, would be a better question. Nope. So if you were to take this on a fairly regular basis, it could serve, potentially, as a rudimentary birth control. It's contraceptive. Okay? If you can't have that vaginal lining build up, the egg can't embed, and you will not develop a full-blown pregnancy. Not the way that you need to, okay, in order for the gestation period to follow as it should. Okay? That is an actual historical fact. And going back to the Greeks and to the Romans, it's in all of their scientific textbooks for this purpose. Okay? Next one is wormwood, same deal. Oh, it also makes this one. So he's put basically a double dose. Okay? These two plants are from the same family, the same subfamily, and the same tribe. They're just different plants, but they make the same thing. Okay? And then he said pennyroyal. This is a picture from the American History site, but it's a Smithsonian. They used to just sell it, pennyroyal pills. Lady on the cover, pretty flower. So if at the time in, say, 1910, 1911, if you were a single lady or a lady in a relationship looking to maybe not have an illegitimate child, if you saw that box, you know what this box is communicating to you? This is birth control pills. They obviously, at that time period, they couldn't come out and say that because it was 1911. But everyone knew that's what pennyroyal was for. Everyone knew that. This is mail order corner pharmacy pills. Okay, before the FDA was invented to regulate medicines. This was just sold everywhere. Okay. This is kind of like the open code of like, did you need some pennyroyal? Okay. You know, that's just kind of how it was done. These are the chemicals that are doing its job there. Also a plant, but not in the same family, but kind of works in a similar way. Induces menstruation. That is the code word, by the way, historically, especially in the 18th and 19th century. It would have been medicines to, quote, induce menstruation. That's contraception or an abortifacient. This is by far, I think, Martin's most historically accurate and chemically accurate recipe. And that tells you what he thinks is important in his stories is he spent the most time and he got the one thing the most correct is the ones that allow human beings to interact intimately with one another. Not the things that kill, not the things that heal. The one thing in his book series he got dead on right was moon tea. And I think that tells you something about what he values in his books, is maybe the human interactions, not the violence. But that's my own estimation. So when you move forward to this new series, which starts in about a month, I want you to take some time to look at the new series, and is there something in there that you can't explain? Or is there something in there that if you take a little bit of time and you use your science know-how and your Google foo, you can find an answer for? You can find a real-life equivalent for. So don't think of Game of Thrones as a break from homework. It is homework. Okay? Thank you, guys. Any questions? I think I covered everything but dragons. And I even have an answer for that.
The steel and the blades.
Yes.
That you talked about, the Valerian.
Valerian steel.
Is that, is there like some chemical formulation of steel that would be comparable?
Well, steel already is an alloy.
Yeah.
So there are different types of steel, right? Just like there are different types of aluminum and different types of titanium-based alloys. And so I think there could be a couple different options, the grades of steel that you could use. And even now with the stuff you're able to do with graphene and carbon ribbons or carbon nanotubes to reinforce between layers. So I think that you could definitely, material science-wise, I think actually with steel and with some of the other metal alloys, we're already there. We just don't use them for that kind of weaponry anymore because we have assault rifles. Swords and swinging around swords is just, it looks cool, but it's not practical for modern warfare. But we've got that kind of alloy for, airliners and, even our jets and different composites that we're using for all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I think we're there already. All right, you guys, thanks very much.